Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. I'm so happy to see some familiar faces from my last training, and I see some new faces as well, so that's always good. Today, I will be showing you how to simply just use your MAP data to structure meaningful, targeted interventions. So if you are new to interventions and trying to figure out how to get started, or you're here because your current system needs a little makeover, then you're in the right place. But before we do get started, let me just share a little bit about myself for the newbies who are here with us this morning. My name is Shelly, and I have been in education for over 15 years. I have a master's degree in educational leadership and a bachelor's in elementary education. In my current role, I am a literacy and intervention specialist. Before this, I was the head of English and also led the EAL department. So now a little fun fact about me, I am a foodie at heart, so I absolutely love trying new snacks from around the world. As someone who has been in education for a while, I kind of noticed that there's a lack of information when it comes to interventions. So my goal for today's training is to go over some core concepts with you guys. And hopefully by the end of this training, you should be able to analyze and understand your MAP class profile data. You should be able to understand how to structure your interventions. You should be able to design a curriculum map for your targeted interventions, and you should be able to incorporate AI into your lessons. Okay, so these are our hopeful outcomes, or our outcomes for today. So today's training, it will be between 45 and 50 minutes, just enough to give you a brief overview. If after the training you need more, or if you have any more specific questions, please feel free to message me and we can schedule a time to speak. Okay, so let's take a look at our agenda for today. So these are the things that we will be covering. First, I'll start you with some quick facts about the MAP growth assessment. Just enough for the newbies here today to have a general understanding, because I know in this group we have a mixed variation of different teachers of experience with MAP. So hopefully I should be able to give you a little bit of background on MAP for our newbies. Then we will look at how to structure your intervention sessions using research-based strategies that really work. After that, I'll walk you through how to group your students using some of the data, like the class profile and the instructional areas data. After that, we will explore how to actually teach your whole group or what to teach your whole group and small group lessons by using the Learning Continuum. And hopefully, if we have enough time, I will walk you through how to use Magic School AI and ChatGPT to help you with planning faster and smarter. At the end, I'll wrap it up with some last-minute tips and followed by any questions you all may have. How does that sound? It sounds good? Yes? Okay. Well, let's go ahead and get started. I see the thumbs up and the hearts, so good. So let's go ahead and get into talk a little bit about MAP. So let's just talk about some key facts about the MAP growth assessment. First, the MAP growth covers 4 subjects: reading, language, math, and science. Second, the test is not timed, which is great because it allows students to work at their own pace. And it also helps us to get a more accurate measure of what they know. Also, the MAP growth assessment is given 3 times a year, usually in the fall, which is at the beginning of the year, winter, which is mid-year, around December, January, and then spring towards the end of the school year. So that helps us teachers and educators to track student growth and adjust instruction throughout the year, not just at the end or at the beginning. Additionally, each student gets 1 overall RIT score, but also sub-scores in specific instructional areas. These sub-scores are invaluable when it comes to grouping your students, and we will look at these more carefully because the sub-scores is what really helps you to make your whole group and small group lessons very, very targeted, okay? And finally, MAP is aligned to your state standards. So the skills assessed directly connect to what you're already teaching in the classroom. I didn't mention this, but by the way, if you have any questions, just write them down, and then I will answer as many questions as I can in the Q&A session towards the end, okay? So one more important feature about the MAP is that it is an adaptive assessment, okay, which means the test will adjust to each student's performance while taking the test. So here's kind of how it works. So when a student answers a question correctly on the MAP, the next question will get a little harder. And when they answer incorrectly, then the next question gets a little bit easier. And so this process, it just keeps going and going throughout the test. And by the end, it gives us an accurate picture of the student's instructional level. Not just a score, but exactly where they should be and what they're ready to develop, what skills they're ready to develop. So now that you guys understand a little bit about MAP growth and how it's an adaptive assessment, let's talk about what we're comparing student scores to. So many of you who have used MAP before have seen this chart before, or it must look familiar, but these are the MAP growth norms, and they give us a baseline for where each student is based on their grade level and the testing window for fall, winter, and spring. So let me show you this example here. Here I highlighted grade 6 language norms, because we're going to really be focusing on grade 6 data today. So here you'll see for fall, grade 6 students are expected to earn a 209 on the MAP, on their MAP assessment. Okay, and then in winter it goes up a little bit, and they are expected to earn a 212 on the assessment. And then in spring it goes up to 214. Okay, and that's just for language, because every box here is for each different subcategory or subject. So this one is reading here, these are the math norms, and these are the science norms. All the norms are different for every subject. They're not the same. So you do have to look at each one individually. So think of this as the national average, because it helps us to answer the question, okay, is this student performing at, above, or below level for their expected grade? Okay. So while the test adapts to show us what each student knows, these norms help us to interpret the scores and to make meaningful instructional decisions. Okay. So let's take a little pause and let's do a little poll. If you can, scan the QR code here and answer the poll question. The question is, what are interventions? Okay, what are interventions to you? So I'll give you guys a minute, and then I'll show you guys the responses, or I'll share the responses with you. But if you could go ahead and scan the QR and just take a minute to answer the question, what are interventions? Many of you said that interventions are action, instructional strategy, plan, focus, results, students. Great. You know, those are all great answers. Oh, there we go. Now we have a few more. Behavior, bridge, shine, boost. Oh, that's a good one too. Boost, design, strategy, blueprint. Let's see, what's this one? Journey, thriving, roadmap. Great answers. Really great answers. And now let's talk about when should we use interventions, right? Interventions should be used all the time, right? Really, our lessons should be interventions, because interventions is really just about targeted instruction, right? Great teachers, they use data consistently, not just during assessment periods. They use it daily to ensure that they're teaching exactly what their students need in order to grow and succeed. Sometimes what I notice is that teachers tend to mainly focus on students who are struggling, while students who are more advanced don't always get the challenge that they need. And many schools believe that interventions are just for struggling students, but in reality, interventions should support all students, whether they need a boost, a challenge, or reinforcement. I like to think of it as like a custom tailored suit. So you wouldn't wear something one size fits all, right? You want something that fits you perfectly. The same goes for teaching. Interventions are just a way of tailoring instruction to fit each student's unique learning needs. So let's talk about research. So in education, we have many brilliant minds conducting research studies in education. Some of you are familiar with Archer and Hughes, as they have written some of our books and curriculums. But let's be honest, sometimes that research feels a little too theoretical and not always easy to apply in the real classroom settings. So what I like to do is take that research and translate it into practical, ready-to-use strategies that teachers can use instantly with their students right away and with confidence. So that's what I'm going to share with you guys today. So let's take a look at some research-based strategies that I found the most effective when running interventions. The first one is explicitly teaching test-taking strategies. This means that I'm teaching students how to break down MAP-style questions while also building their confidence in approaching and answering them effectively. The next research-based strategy is using whole group lessons. These whole group lessons should be short. They're focused sessions using modeling, guided practice, and just quick checks for understanding. Okay? Interventions should also have small group lessons. Okay, small group lessons where you're using your MAP data to group your students and give them very scaffolded, targeted instruction. And then all interventions, to be very successful, research shows that you should be monitoring and adjusting your instruction based on how you see the students performing and based on the newest data that you've received from MAP. Okay, so now that we've talked about some of these research-based strategies, now let me share with you how I took these strategies and structured my intervention session. So this is kind of how I have my intervention sessions scheduled. Now, that doesn't mean you have to do it exactly like this, but if you're looking for somewhere to start, this is a good place to start. You see here, the first 5 to 7 minutes, I give my students spell work, and many of us as educators, we do this already, but for this spell work, I'm making it specifically, I'm giving my students MAP-style questions for them to practice seeing these type of questions, and also so that I can practice going over test-taking strategies with them. So these strategies I explicitly teach and model to my students. So some of them that I do teach is like process of elimination, looking for clue words in the question, reading all the answer choices before making a decision, because it helps students build familiarity with the test format and it promotes critical thinking. So then after the bell work, and we've gone over the MAP style-like questions as a class, then we move into a whole group lesson. This whole group lesson is a high leverage, it's focused on a high leverage skill, which I will show you how you can determine if it's a high leverage skill or not. And it's something that normally appears on the MAP Learning Continuum over and over. And I will share that with you and how to look for that. Okay, these lessons are short. So whole group lessons are short, they're very focused, and they follow the explicit instructional model of I do, we do, you do. Okay, this helps all students to stay aligned while preparing them for more individualized work. After the whole group lesson, then we move into small groups, small group lessons, or what I like to do is stations. Okay, and this is where the students are grouped by RIT bands, and I provide differentiated activities based on what students need. I like to use tools like Edpuzzle, Nearpod, Achieve 3000, No Red Ink. These are some of the tools that I like to use for small group or for stations. You can rotate, and during small group, you can rotate as a teacher, which is great, because when my kids are doing small group activities, that is when I pull students who need extra support or students that I noticed had a hard time during the whole group lesson. I pull them during this time and I work with them on their specific needs. And every 2 weeks, I give students a little quick check or a mini assessment to see, okay, what is working? What have they learned? What do I need to maybe adjust for my lesson plan moving forward? So these are just some MAP resources, and I will share this with you all. Actually, I posted these in my LinkedIn teacher group.
which is called Educators Empowering Educators.
I have placed these resources in there already. So once you join that group, you will see that they've already been added in there and you will have access to these. And all the resources today in our training is also in my LinkedIn group. And I will share that with you guys in an email as well, so that way you guys can join and view all the resources from today's training. So go ahead and scan the QR code and answer the question. The question is, what do you think is the difference between whole group and small group lessons? There's no right or wrong answer. This is just a chance to see, okay, how is everyone using these different group structures in their classrooms? So go ahead and take a minute. I'll give everyone a minute and then I'll share the responses. See, what is the difference? I see some of you put, oh, the size and the setting. Yeah, that's a great answer. Someone wrote, whole is general for everyone. Great. Small group is focused. Amazing. And whole group is for everyone. Small group is for specific needs. Great responses. Now we're going to start looking at data. Okay. So that way we can start putting pieces together for our lesson planning. So we're going to look at grade 6 class data, and we're going to use this data to help us group students by RIT ranges. We're also going to use it to identify skills for whole group instruction, and also to plan small group or stations lessons that are targeted and meaningful. So as we go through this process, keep in mind, we're not just looking at the data, but we're also trying to see, okay, how can I build my curriculum map on my instruction and aligning the instruction for what my students need to learn next. Okay, so what we're going to be working on is completing this learning continuum here, or this curriculum map. Here's the snapshot of the master curriculum map that I created to guide my intervention planning throughout the semester. So I use this format because it really helps me to see, okay, what skills do I need to target each week for my whole group lessons, and which skills do I need to focus on for my small group lessons, okay? And it also helps me to gather details in order to plan or coordinate my lesson plan. And it does take a little bit of work up front, but once it's done, you can use it to go back to as a reference and to glance at it and know exactly what you're teaching and who you're teaching it to and what do you need in order to teach those lessons. So this structure helps my intervention to be more focused, more efficient, and it aligns with my students' needs. So we're going to work on filling this out, and we're going to walk through the steps on how to fill this out. So let's go ahead and start looking at the data. The main report we will use on the NWEA MAP website is the class profile report. And some of you are already familiar with this, but then we do have some newbies in here. And so I have put the steps here on how to access this report, the class profile, because that's the one you will look at to determine, okay, who's in your small whole group lessons, or what to teach your whole group lessons, what to teach your small group lessons. And it also just helps you to see an overall view of how your students are performing. So when you log into the NWEA website, you're going to click on the MAP Growth tab, and then you're going to click on the class profile. Okay, and once you click on that, you will see a graph that looks very similar to this, but you're going to click on instructional areas. Okay, and once you click on instructional areas, it will take you to this specifically here. And what we're looking at today, we're looking at the language, okay, the language usage map, okay. So on the left-hand side here, you will see these are the subcategories in this language exam. Now, I know I'm sharing language with you, but this is the same for math. This is the same for science. When you log into your instructional areas, you will see these subcategories for your exam as well. And that's very important because it really tells you which areas your students perform the highest or perform very well in, or which areas they perform the lowest in. It's just a brief overview. So Here you will see the subcategories for language is understanding edit for grammar, understanding edit for mechanics, and writing, right? This bar graph gives us a breakdown of how our students perform in each of these subcategories. So you see how it has red. The red is for, of course, representing the far below grade level students. The orange represents students who are performing below grade level. Yellow is students who are approaching or just meeting the grade level norms. Sometimes we refer to these as bubble students. That means they're about to meet the goal that they need to meet for their grade level. Green represents students who are exceeding their grade level, and then the blue is students who are highly exceeding the grade level norms, okay? So here, if we look at the second row, we will see here, this is where my largest red is. You see I have 34% of my students perform very, very low in this area. And if you think about it, 34 is in the red, and 13, which is very low as well, are in the orange. So combine these two things, I have about 50% of my class perform very low in this area. So this tells me right away that this is an area that I want to focus on in my whole group lessons, okay? And you're going to do the same thing. When you look at your data, you're going to look at the same thing. You're going to look for the red and the orange. When you combine those two areas together, what is the percentage? And whichever one of those areas has the highest percentage, I would recommend for you to start in that area first for your whole group lessons, okay? So now I have identified that for this group in grade 6, that the lowest area is understanding edit for mechanics, and that's the area that I'm going to focus on for whole group lessons. And you know what? Because many of you guys are new to interventions and you're trying to get started, I would highly recommend that since whatever area your whole group or your whole class is low in, like for example, mine was this area of edit for mechanics, I will also focus on this for my small groups. So think about, okay, now for whole groups, I'm going to focus on the understanding for edit for mechanics, and in my small groups, I will also focus on this subcategory to start off with, okay? So now I know what I'm teaching in my whole group and small groups, right? I know the area that I'm going to focus on. So now let's look at the next report that's going to help us to put students in groups. And when you scroll down, this graph is the next one you see when you scroll down from the instructional areas percentiles, which was the graph we just seen on the previous slide. When you scroll down, you will see this, okay? The same for math, the same for science, okay? And the same for reading. You will see this graph as well. And you can click on the subcategory, and I have highlighted here the language understanding for mechanics because I've already identified that as the area that I want to focus on for my whole group and small groups. And what this does, it just groups your kids already for you. So it shows you their RIT bands here. So you see here I have one student in RIT range 181 to 190, and you can see their score here inside the box. It's Ali. His name is Ali, and he scored a 187. Then I have two students who scored 191 to 200, and these are their names, these are their scores, okay? Then you see I have other RIT ranges too with other students. So now what I'm doing here, which you see that I've circled, I'm grouping my students for my small group lessons, right? During small group lessons is a good time to call students over or work with these small groups of students on specific skills that they need. So by grouping them, I can start teaching specific skills, okay, to them. So here I grouped these two together. You see I grouped RIT band 181 to 190 and 191 to 200 because they're so close together. Their RIT bands are so close together that means that they're going to have similar skills that they will need to work on. So that's why I grouped them together. Then you see here I grouped, my second group is these three students. They're all in the same range, which is good. It will help me with planning to make it a little bit easier. Then my third group is 211 to 220, these three students. Then my fourth small group is these three students. And then my last group, which is my highest achievers here, you see Jack and Mike, they had the highest scores. I put them in a group, okay? Now, I have 5 groups, and I have been doing interventions for a while. But for those who are starting off, you can maybe even make your groups a little bit bigger, so that way you don't have 5 groups. You can maybe start off with 3 groups. So that way it also helps with planning, okay? And which we will talk a little bit more about in the next few slides. So now we have identified our groupings, right? We've identified the group ranges of our students. We've identified which students I'm going to teach together in small group lessons. So now let's look at our learning continuum or our curriculum map. So now you see here, I started filling this out. So what am I going to focus on? Edit for mechanics, because I've identified that as an area of weakness for this class. Who am I going to teach in whole groups? I'm going to teach all the students the same. We're going to focus on the same subcategory. Then you see here, I started putting the students' names, the students who are in my group 1. And I put their RIT ranges, 181 to 190. And then remember, I had 2 students, 191 to 200, right? Then you see I put the names for group 2, group 3, group 4, group 5, and their RIT ranges, okay? Because that's going to help me with moving to the learning continuum, which we will talk about now, and finding the skills that they need. So the next thing we're going to do, we're going to start looking at which skills do we need to teach these groups in whole group and in small groups, okay? So let's go ahead and transition. I have placed here, which I will share with you all, or I'll place it inside my LinkedIn group,
which is called Educators Empowering Educators.
I will place all these resources for you guys so that you can access them and use them at your own leisure. And I also will place this, which is the steps on how to access the learning continuum, which we will look at now. So these are just the steps so you can access it on your own time. When you log in, it automatically groups it by standard, which is good if you're trying to get an overview of what your students are learning and how does it tie with the standards. But what I find the most helpful is switching here. You see it says group by topic. I love using that feature there, because when you click on that, what it will do, and here I'm going to actually click on the subcategory. Remember, my subcategory that I said I was going to focus on is language. So I'm going to click on that subcategory. And let me just scroll over a bit. You will see here what it does. It gives you very specific skills that each student within each RIT band needs to learn. Okay? Now, my students, based on the information that we gathered, most of my students are in this RIT range, 181, 191 to 200, and the next few bands here. So it shows me exactly which skills they need to work on, which is great. So now what I'm going to look for is, okay, what do I teach in my whole group lessons? So for your whole group lessons, what you're going to do, now that you know what ranges your students are in, you're going to look for patterns. Which skills are repeating over and over within the different RIT ranges? For example, like I know remember my group 1 and my group 2 students from my small groups, many of them were in these ranges. And when I look at these skills, you see here it says capitalizing the first word in a sentence. Then I look to the next RIT range, and it says the same thing. So this tells me that this is a skill that I can teach to both of these groups, okay? But it also tells me maybe this is something I could teach in my whole group lesson, okay? I can teach this to my whole group lesson because it will benefit both of these students in both of these ranges, okay? Now, remember, I have students in different ranges too, and higher ranges. So I need to look for something else that is repetitive to teach in my whole group lesson. And if I keep going, you will see here, I have students in these levels, and you will see the RIT ranges here. This is 201 to 210, 211 to 220. And you will see here that something else I noticed, capitalizing the first word in a greeting, closing, or a letter. And it repeats again in this next band too. So you see these skills, or this skill is something that multiple students need to know in my class. So this is something else that I may consider teaching whole group. And remember, when you teach whole group, you try to make it as scaffolded as you can. So you want to make sure that you're making it challenging for your lower students, or you want to make sure that it's targeting your lower students. So that's why we're going to stick with capitalizing the first word in a sentence. in my whole group lessons for my lower students, but then I'm also going to scaffold in capitalizing the first word in a greeting or closing of a letter for my mid-ability students, right? So then the last thing I need to do is my higher ability students. Remember, I had two students, or actually I had quite a few students who were in these two ranges here, right? So I see here something that I notice that repeats between their two RIT bands is recognizing correct capitalization and divided quotations. So that tells me this is something that I also want to teach whole group, okay? Because it repeats between two different bands. If you see that a skill repeats between 2, 3, 4 different bands, definitely teach that whole group, okay? That is my tips of wisdom for you guys. If you see a skill that repeats more than two or more categories, teach it whole group, okay? Because it will target more of your students in your classrooms, okay? So now we talked a little bit about this learning continuum. Now there's a lot in here, but just remember, you're looking, as long as you're pulling skills that are from your student-specific RIT ranges, you are providing, that means you are going to be providing targeted instruction. So that's what you want, as long as you're pulling things specifically to your students' needs. That is the biggest takeaway. And now you see everything that we just talked about, I pulled it here for my whole group lesson, okay? So for my whole group lesson, this is going to be the skills that I teach, and it's going to be scaffolded, right? Capitalizing the first words in a sentence, capitalizing the first words in the greeting or closing of a letter, and then recognizing correct capitalization and divided quotations. Now, I know you're thinking, oh, this is a lot to teach in a lesson, but actually, it's almost like your success criteria. So first, you're going to make sure all the students, I apologize, I went over too fast. You're going to make sure all your students can capitalize the first word in a sentence first. Once they can do that, you're going to see if they can work on capitalizing the first words in a greeting. Then after that, they're going to work on recognizing the correct capitalization. So they're going to go through this flow and hopefully be able to do all 3 skills, which is great. And then the same thing. So for small groups, when I looked at the learning continuum, I pulled skills that were specific to that RIT range by looking at the learning continuum. So here I put skills based on that specific RIT range for these students. Okay? And these are the skills that I will cover in my small group lessons. And like I said, these were straight from the learning continuum, these skills here. Okay? And remember, the learning continuum, it doesn't mean you have to teach everything on there, right? But the skills that you see are repetitive. Those are the big ones. Those are the ones you want to target, okay, in your whole group, or if not, in your small groups, okay? So I actually, in my small group lessons, what I like to do, I love to, I have my students do stations. And I was going to share with you all how I run my stations, because my stations are very targeted. And here's an example. Like, this is one of my stations in my classroom. I have 8 stations in my classroom, which is activities that I post on the walls. And these are big posters that I put on my walls, and every student has to rotate through all the stations. And this station you see here, when a student goes to this language edit for mechanics station, they have to pick the activity that's specific to their RIT range. So if one of my students has, let's say for their language score, they had a 215, when they go to do this station activity, they know they have to do this orange activity because it's between their RIT range. And I made sure that this activity that I put here for him is specifically to his needs, okay? So I will be sharing, I actually will be having another workshop on stations only. So if you're interested on how to run stations, especially targeted stations for interventions, I will send out more information on that training coming up. It'll probably be over the summer. And I also want to let everyone know, I actually work with grades 6 through 8, and stations is something that I use with middle school. So it's not just something that you use for primary. It can be used for middle school, and I have even used it in high school too. Just to let you know about some of the resources that I like to use, especially for small groups. Because remember, during small groups, you need to make sure that your kids are working independently on targeted skills, right? I have them work independently so that way it gives me time to pull students little by in their groups and work with them on maybe a specific skill or maybe to reteach something that I noticed they struggled with. So you really need to make sure that during small groups that they are doing independent practice to allow you freedom to work with students in small groups. Okay, so these are some of the resources that I use, especially for language, and some of these are you can also use for math or for reading and science as well. Now, we're a bit short on time, but I do want to let you know that magicschool.ai, right now they're offering all educators a free plus subscription, which means that it will give you access to more of the tools. So please, I will share this with you, or I will share this in my LinkedIn group,
which is called Educators Empowering Educators.
Definitely need to take advantage of making sure you get this free account. This AI, Magic School AI, is a really useful tool when planning, and I wanted to get more into details with using it, but I see that we're running a bit short on time. But make sure you register for it, and what I will do in my next session, maybe I will take some time to just go over it more in detail. And on this next slide, what I did here, I put some prompts that you can use when you go into magicschool.ai. When you go into the lesson generator tool, these are exact prompts you can copy and paste. And of course, you may have to adjust it a little bit to your specific subject, but you can use the majority of these prompts to help you with creating lesson plans for whole group and lesson plans for your small groups. Okay, so I will share this with you so you can just copy and paste it into magicschool.ai. Okay, now we are near the end, but I do want to share some final keys for running effective interventions, okay? Because I did go over a lot of information, and like I said, if you do have any questions, please feel free to message me and we can set up a time to meet. But some things I do want to make sure, some takeaways, is to don't worry about teaching everything on the Learning Continuum, okay? It's there as a tool, not a checklist to make sure you're doing everything on there. But as long as you focus on some of the biggest skills that you see are repetitive, it will make a big impact on your students' learning gains. Okay? Also, focus on just making all your lessons as targeted as possible. As long as you're using the Learning Continuum and you're pulling skills from there, from your students' levels, your lessons are going to be so targeted, and hopefully you will see a large result or a large increase in your students' scores. Also, and I mentioned this before, but those who are starting new for interventions, start by grouping similar RIT bands together. Remember, I had 5 groups in my small groups, but feel free to make your groups a little bit bigger, so that way maybe you only have 3 small groups. And that way it helps a little bit with planning too, because now you only have to plan for 3 small groups, okay? And just make sure to provide your students with lots of feedback, okay? Give them as much feedback as possible, immediate feedback in their small groups, okay? And always celebrate their growth, big or small. Always acknowledge their effort and acknowledge that they've mastered specific skills, so that builds their confidence. All right, and that is the end of our presentation here. I will be sharing my LinkedIn group with you all, but in case you want to go ahead and try to find it now,
which is called Educators Empowering Educators.
These resources will be posted in there for you guys to use. But if you could please scan the survey and just provide me some feedback on this training, and also to provide me feedback on what else you would like me to share with you all in the next upcoming trainings. That would be wonderful. But let me go ahead, and while you guys are scanning that, I will see if anyone had questions. Let me see if I can check to see. If you have any questions at this time, please feel free to write them in the chat, and I will try to answer them as you guys are completing the survey. Hagar, I think you wrote a question there. I think you're asking if you should embed interventions in your lesson plan. Is that what you're asking? If you can elaborate a little bit, or if you want to turn your microphone on, that would be great.
Yes, that's my question. Should I make a separate lesson for the intervention plan, or just like embedded in my lesson according to the topic I'm working on it?
Yeah, both are great, to be honest, because, not all of us, not all schools have a separate time for interventions. So,
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So that's perfect. So if you do not have that separate interventions time, you will embed some of these skills in your lesson. So you can embed some of them in there, and that way you're covering some of the skills that they need, but also covering the lesson for that specific grade level. Because I know that in our classrooms, we have kids who are below level, and then we have to teach to them and also teach the grade level content. So you will have to, like you said, you will have to go ahead, pull some skills, and see how you can integrate it in your lesson plan. And that would be, that would be perfect.
Okay, thank you.
No, you're welcome. Great question. And let's see, Manpreet, Shelly, I couldn't find the group name Teachers Empowering Teachers. Oh, yes, no problem. I will share. Let me see if I can open it. If not, I will email it to you guys as well. If you guys don't have any questions, thank you so much for joining. And like I said, I will be having another training specifically on stations. And another one, you know what? I will probably have another training just on AI, because I know we were short on time, so I didn't get to go into details. So I will share those upcoming trainings with you all. But thank you so much for being here. And if you have no other questions, you guys are free to go and have a wonderful weekend.